Putin Breaking News. Pelosi claims anti-genocide demonstrators are Putin operatives. On national television on Sunday morning, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made the poisonous claim that Russian President Vladimir Putin was behind the financing and promotion of the massive demonstrations against the Israeli genocide in Gaza. Pelosi's remarks were a toxic mix of political ignorance and malicious slander. On CNN's interview show, State of the Union, host Dana Bash asked Pelosi if young people, Arab Americans, and progressives would be so opposed to U.S.-Israeli actions in Gaza that they would not vote for Biden in November. According to the network-posted transcript, this conversation next ensued. Pelosi, "Well, I must admit that I have been the target of their, shall we call, enthusiasms, and it's come to my attention that they attempted to derail our highly anticipated Democratic gathering in Seattle on Thursday. They never leave the area in front of my house. Now we can talk about that." However, the request for a ceasefire is clearly a message from Mr. Putin. There is no mistaking the connection between this and his desires. Ukrainian situation is the same. Putin's message is at the heart of the matter. It seems to me that there are some protesters here who are genuine, authentic, and acting on their own accord. I believe some of them have ties to Russia. You know, I've been staring at this for quite some time, so I can say that with confidence. Bash, so you're saying that some of these demonstrations are orchestrated by the Russian government? I don't think those are plants, Pelosi. Some funding should be looked into, in my opinion. Also, I'd want to request that the FBI look into it. The remarks made by Pelosi were strongly criticized by organizations that fight against bigotry and prejudice, such as CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. Nihad Awad, National Executive Director of CARE, expressed profound distress about remarks made by former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Without providing any proof, Representative Pelosi's assertion that some of the Americans participating in the Gaza ceasefire protests are collaborating with Vladimir Putin comes across as utterly dictatorial. Tragically, Representative Pelosi's remarks harken back to a period in American history when those who opposed the Vietnam War were falsely accused of being communist sympathizers and harassed by the FBI. A large number of American citizens, including youth, progressives, Jews, Muslims, Palestinians, and Black Americans, have been gathering in Gaza to demand an end to the fighting. According to prominent surveys, a majority of Democrats and millions of Americans support a ceasefire. However, the mainstream corporate media paid little attention to Pelosi's McCarthyite defamation. Aside from the New York Times' one short news piece, neither the Wall Street Journal nor the Washington Post offered any commentary. Among the broadcast and cable networks, only CNN, the same network where Pelosi had made an appearance, reported any backlash against her comments. In October, while addressing demonstrators outside her house who were chanting, "Stop the genocide," in response to the killing in Gaza, Pelosi made similar comments. The Holocaust must end. As Pelosi got into her car, a woman approached her and said, "Democrats want the ceasefire." Pelosi retorts, "Return to China, where your headquarters are." The demonstrators didn't look Asian, they were white, even though this person was the party's top lobbyist on Capitol Hill just 13 months ago. Not a single prominent Democrat has responded to these remarks. Republicans in the House who support Trump have been attacking anyone who call for a ceasefire, including college students who have been falsely accused of being anti-Semites for speaking out against the genocide in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has been ignoring calls for a truce. It would be unfair to write off these remarks as the hallucinations of an 83-year-old who was known for her word salads, even while she was the leader of the Democrats and the Speaker of the House. Following the 2022 election, in which the Democratic Party's House majority was narrowly defeated, Pelosi resigned as leader of the party. Pelosi may have struggled in front of an audience, but behind the scenes, she was a powerful and staunchly conservative politician with ties to the highest echelons of the American state apparatus and its network of military intelligence. Before she became the head of the Democratic caucus, she spent a lot of time on the House Intelligence Committee, where she and the other members of the Gang of Eight were often briefed on classified U.S. military activities. Having served as Speaker of the House twice, from 2006 to 2010 and again from 2018 to 2022, she was second in line to the presidency, after the vice president, and was instrumental in bipartisan cooperation under Presidents Trump and George W. Bush. She implied that the Russian government, and apparently the Chinese government as well, were meddling in American politics and taking advantage of or even causing rifts within the country when she told Dana Bash, "I say that having looked at this for a long time now, as you know." This was something she had believed for decades from her work with intelligence agencies. Reactionary McCarthyite defamation characterizes the assertion that the protesters against the Israeli slaughter in Gaza are being influenced and funded by Moscow and Beijing. Even as a little child, Pelosi would have internalized such strategies. During the majority of the 1950s, she attended a Catholic girls' college and high school in Baltimore, Maryland, where her father was a Democratic congressman. After Stalin's fall, Pelosi became notorious for her role in the military intelligence apparatus's anti-Russian and anti-Chinese provocations. In 2019, she authorized the first impeachment of Trump over his conversation with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and she was a staunch supporter of the Democratic Party's campaign painting Trump as an obedient puppet of Russian President Vladimir Putin. To exert pressure on the Kiev regime, Trump momentarily halted U.S. military aid while he sought compromising information on Democrat Joe Biden. U.S. efforts to use Ukraine as a front against Russia, which had been underway since the Obama administration, were jeopardized by this. Pelosi has long been a supporter of right-wing émigré groups with ties to San Francisco's Chinatown, the biggest in the United States, and other Chinese communities. In August 2022, during one of her last actions as Speaker of the House, Pelosi made history by visiting Taiwan. She was the highest-ranking U.S. official to do so, going against the grain of the Chinese-American One China policy, which recognizes Taiwan as an integral component of China rather than a sovereign nation. Speaker Pelosi wants to see further investigation ahead of the 2024 election because, informed by 3 decades on the House Intelligence Committee, Speaker Pelosi is acutely aware of how foreign adversaries meddle in American politics to sow division and impact our elections. A representative for the Congresswoman referenced this record indirectly when explaining Pelosi's remarks. As political attacks go, the accusation that anti-genocide demonstrators are funded by Moscow and are simply carrying out Putin's orders is rather sleazy. A number of countries' governments have also called for a truce, including Russia's. A swift end to the fighting in Gaza was supported by 153 members of the Union General Assembly in December. The 67-member Democratic caucus in the House, 13 of whom are from California, and the San Francisco City Council, where Pelosi resides, are in agreement. Approximately 1.25% of the Democratic primary vote in New Hampshire last week came from 1,500 voters who marked "ceasefire" on their ballots. For a national scale, this would amount to approximately 1 million Democrats purportedly working for Putin. Considering that there are 80 million Democratic voters, the Democratic leadership's inability to connect with the real sentiments of millions of workers and youth, as well as their growing frustration with the obvious unpopularity of the Biden administration's policies, including its support for Israeli genocide in Gaza and, more generally, imperialist war in Ukraine and the Far East, are both demonstrated by the smear campaign.